John McGrath. My custody case came about after a few years of joint custody in situations where the mother of my children did not abide by the agreed upon custody schedule. On the children's birthdays, my birthdays, Father's Day, I never saw my children when she had custody, even though I had a legally signed agreement to do so. Eventually it got to the point where she tried to file for full custody of the children and take the children away from me. I counterfiled for full custody. And then we hired attorneys and got going into the Hennepin County Family Court system. My first attorney, who I ended up paying somewhere in the neighborhood of $180,000, or no, I shouldn't say my first attorney, the attorney that I ended up with for the trial. He got pretty wealthy in a short period of time off of me and refused to do what he should have done. I asked him on a number of occasions to file contempt motions, and he talked me out of it and claimed that it was a waste of time and that the judges didn't like us doing that. And he said save it for the trial. The case was basically rigged from the start. The children's mother is employed by the county herself, and her sister is an attorney who has worked for the county in the past. And the guardians and parenting consultants and their lawyer and boss all graduated from the same local law school and were, if not at least familiar with one another, social friends. Timothy Mulrooney was a referee in our case. Not really a judge, he's just a lawyer acting as a referee. Mr. Mulrooney was biased and abusive from the start. He ordered psychological evaluations because of my concerns and obvious concerns on the part of everybody involved about the mental health of the children's mother. I had read and studied a great deal by then about abusive, disordered personalities, and I had experienced her abusive outrages and intoxicated barrages many times. I was confident of my own mental health, so I agreed to do an evaluation as well in order to get them to order the evaluations. My lawyer made an oral agreement with her lawyer that we would share the summary results of the evaluations. I got it confirmed in emails from him, and I insisted to him that we get it in writing, and he refused to do so, saying it was not necessary. Little did I know then it would take over 18 months ultimately to get the results from them, and only then because of the trial evidence. And what we finally found out was horrifying. It confirmed everything I had thought and what I had been telling both my attorney and the courts, but it was just before the trial that we finally got them. In fact, the referee ordered a second set of evaluations, and when the second evaluation confirmed the first evaluations, I was confident and thought my case would be relatively easy. In both evaluations that I took, by every measure, I was in the normal range. Even one of those was done by a Hennepin County doctor. Then the unbelievable thing happened. The judge, at the start of the trial and pre-trial hearings, refused to allow either one of the doctors who did the evaluations to testify. One of them would have been difficult because he actually was leaving the country, but the second one was there, ready to testify, and he refused to allow the doctor to testify. And this was as a result of two people. The first person, Angie Banga. Angie Banga acts in the role of a parenting consultant. She also acts as a guardian ad litem. I believe she's got her law license. She used to be a CPA. She had a firm called Banga and Manning, out of which she operated. To put things in perspective, the doctor who did the evaluations, the first evaluations, stated to me, after Angie Banga had witnessed my ex-wife going into a screaming rampage and threatening the doctor when she got the results of her first evaluation, and Angie Banga covered it up in court and denied it ever happened, even though the doctor sent a sworn affidavit to the judge explaining everything that happened. Neither of these people, Angie Banga and Jackie Cardinal, who became the guardian ad litem, neither of them have any expertise in psychology or psychological evaluations, yet they somehow got the judge to believe that the evaluations were invalid or somehow not done properly. After the fact, I learned that my ex-wife had filed a complaint after she went into a screaming rampage in the first psychologist's office with Angie Banga present. She filed a complaint with the State Board of Psychology. The State Board of Psychology went through a complete hearing. The doctor who did the evaluations, I had conversations with him. He was horrified by what was going on, but the State Board of Psychology took no action whatsoever, basically put their stamp of approval on the work that he had done. But these two individuals, Angie Banga and Jackie Cardinal, somehow got the judge to believe that they were experts or something in this area and that the evaluations were not valid. They were entered into evidence, but again, the judge refused to allow the psychologist to testify. And that was the key evidence and the key to showing that she was not a competent parent. Angie Banga claimed in court that she was upset, but that she simply walked out unhappy. She covered up the outrage and then claimed the results were not valid. The PC and the guardian ad litem both testified in court and lied about every question that they were answered. They made up stories that were unbelievable. They created a fairy tale. They convinced the judge, even though both my evaluations were completely normal in every regard, that I was somehow an abusive person. The guardian ad litem got a hold of her old friend, a guy by the name of Dave Matthews, who worked for a group called the Domestic Abuse Project. And they gave custody to the mother and told me that I had to go see this gentleman, a domestic abuse counselor, if I wanted to see my children again. And I went to see this Dave Matthews, and the first time I went in there, the only thing his objective was to convince me that I had to admit that I was somehow abusive. I'm not sure to who, because there were never any accusations of any kind of any abuse, either by my ex-wife or the children. Never happened. So I'm not sure how they, orchestrated this frame job, but this guy would not accept me telling him there's never been any abuse, except I've had things thrown at me and been swung at, in a drunken rage by my ex-wife, but I've never raised a finger to anybody. He was not going to let me see my children unless I admitted to some kind of domestic abuse. I refused. So then he wrote a nasty, nasty letter to the judge claiming that I didn't cooperate, that I intimidated him, and a bunch of other fairy tales. So I supposedly couldn't see my children. All along I was seeing my daughter because she refused to abide by the court orders. She and I saw each other on a regular basis, though my son was definitely under the control of his mother. I found out at a later date, after talking to a receptionist at the Domestic Abuse Project, that Dave Matthews was let go after I filed a complaint with the State Board of Social Work, and there were apparently several other complaints about this guy, and he's no longer employed there. He opened his own company called One-T, O-N-E-T, and I would warn anybody, this guy is bad news. So I went and saw another psychologist, therapist, whatever you want to call it, and met with him several times, and he wrote a glowing letter, of which I have a copy, that said, he didn't see any issues with me seeing my children. Then I went back to court. They had a new guardian, a guy by the name of Zach Chesson. Jack Chesson was a guardian for Hennepin County. I met with him the first time. I sat down with him in a room at the Family Justice Center, and the first thing that he said to me was, I know what the judge is requiring of you, but I want to know what you are going to do for me over and above what the judge is requesting if you want to see your children again. What are you going to do for me. And I just couldn't believe it. I mean, basically he's asking me, he's trying to get me to pay him off or, bribe him in some way. And this guy was, he was worse than Jackie Cardinal or Angie Banga. And he was a very young person, and I couldn't believe how abusive he was. He threatened me. He tried to make me pay him. It was just, I couldn't believe it was happening. Anyhow, this therapist that I saw, a guy by the name of Dave, I won't give his last name because he actually did a good job. He said he wrote a letter, addressed it actually to my lawyer at the time, but my lawyer presented it in court, that said that the only thing that was bothering me was the fact that I wasn't seeing my children and that I was a well-balanced, healthy individual, et cetera, et cetera. I went to court again, and this is where Timothy Mulrooney came in to play again. And he decided that what the therapist had written was either a lie or made up, or I don't know what it was. He just pretended as if I hadn't met the requirements of the court, even though Zach Chesson had approved this therapist, and the therapist had said that he didn't foresee me needing any more sessions and that I should be able to see my kids on a regular basis. But Timothy Mulrooney was not going to let that happen. Zach Chesson actually started letting me see my kids, but not because I gave in to him. I was very assertive with him, and it promised him that if he continued to, lie and try to threaten and abuse me, that he would never hear the end of it. So anyhow, as we got to this was a few years ago. Eventually, I was seeing my daughter on a regular basis, my son occasionally, but again, still only rarely. And all the time they're with this woman who is clearly mentally not healthy. And there's a long history of medical records and psychological records that show that. So then Judge Mulrooney, referee Mulrooney, he ignored the letter, and my daughter began writing letters to the court, telling the court that her mother was lying, that her dad was a good dad, that he had never done anything, that he was honest, and that she wanted to live with her dad. And by this time, we were spending quite a bit of time together. Her mother hated it and always tried to schedule things to block our time together, as she had from the beginning. So it's gone on and on. Ultimately, my son has turned 18 years old, and ever since he's turned 18 years old, we've been spending significant time together. And now he's spending at least half his time with me. It's going to take a few years for me to, get him to really accept the truth and understand what happened. My daughter, who is going to be 16 years old this fall, she lives with me more than half the time. She's excelling in school, and she's doing great. And she has written, I believe, 5 or 6 different letters and 3 different affidavits to the courts asking that I be given my rights as a father, and that she wanted to live with me, and she wanted me making all the decisions. At various times, the court either ignored the letters, sent them back, or acknowledged that they received them and sent copies to the other parties. So, depending on the, I guess the situation of the day, they either pretended as if they didn't get the letters, or they said that they weren't properly submitted, or on one occasion, at least, they said that they wanted to make sure everybody involved got copies of the letter. So they dealt with it at least 3 different ways. My daughter pleaded with the court that she wanted to talk to the judge. And in Minnesota, the law states that children who are of a reasonable age of maturity have the right to talk to the judge in chambers, and their wishes as to where they want to live should be taken into consideration. Mulrooney has ignored that completely. I've been to the State Court of Appeals. I filed with the State Court of Appeals not only my daughter's affidavit, but a note that she wrote last fall when she was coming over to my house, and her mom knew she was going to stay at my house for a while. Her mom literally threatened her and stated that if you don't come back, I'm going to burn everything in your room. And my daughter wrote that in a letter that she wanted me to submit to the judge. I submitted it with my appeal to the State Court of Appeals, trying to show endangerment and that my daughter and all of the affidavits and letters she had written. I had testified before the state legislature, a couple of different committees, in front of judges last year. And when this appeal went to the State Court of Appeals, they not only did not even read or pay any attention to my daughter's letters and affidavit, they claimed that I was filing the change of custody because I thought it was hurting her grades, which was bizarre. They ignored completely this terroristic threat on the part of her mother, and then ordered me to pay $6,500 in attorney's fees for my ex-wife. And every motion that I make is denied, and they order me to pay her attorney's fees. That's the way it's been the last year and a half. And I know it's because I have spoken out and spoken up in the legislature and publicly in some other arenas on the internet. My daughter is furious with her mother. Last year, I operate a business in the real estate services industry. I do home inspections. My business obviously has suffered in the last few years. I was paying child support based on an income that, started to decline. In fact, last year was the worst year. This year things have turned around, but my income was cut in half last year from where it would be. I filed for a motion for modification of child support. Of course, they denied the motion because I didn't have my tax returns. I provided them with my QuickBooks records, but I hadn't yet filed the tax return, but I wasn't able to pay, so I wanted to stay ahead of the game. They denied it, and then they decided they said that if I came back to file another modification of child support, that I was in fact probably intentionally reducing my income. I filed another motion after I filed my 2011 tax returns in April this year. I just went through that, and in that, my ex-wife had filed an affidavit claiming that I was living alone in a big house and she was taking care of the children, and I should have to pay this child support, and there's no way they should reduce my income because I just wasn't working as hard, etc. My daughter wrote an affidavit telling the court that, in fact, she had been living with me more than half the time over the past year. The court, I haven't gotten the order back yet, but I had taken all these steps because I had gotten a notice that they were going to take away my driver's license if I didn't. I got a letter that said you need to either pay up or file a motion for modification of custody or modification of child support. I did exactly that. And then 5 days after the hearing, I got a notice in the mail that they were revoking my driver's license. I called 2 or 3 different people, left messages. You could never get anybody live. You have to go through 6 or 8 iterations on the phone to even get to the individual that is handling your case. And I was upset, and I let them know it, and I told them I did exactly what the letter said I should do. Now I get a letter back from them saying that they won't deal with me on the phone because of the message that I left. I just told them, I think I have a right to sue you guys if you're going to treat me like this. So right now they just took away my driver's license. I did get a 90-day temporary license, limited license. My daughter's with me here tonight, so she can drive me home because I can't drive after 7 o'clock at night. I can't drive on Sundays, which probably will cost me about $1,500 in revenues a month. no word from, the court as to and this is the second time I went through this threatening my license thing, and I explained to the guy, hey, you guys sent me a letter. You were supposed to be at this hearing. The hearing that I had on July 19th, I got a letter from child support clearly stating that they were going to be at the hearing, and I assumed that everything was going to be addressed, and they just didn't show up. And that's the kind of game that they play. And I know so many other people that have gone through this, and basically they're, in every respect now, the entire court system, I am a marked man. I know that because I've got friends who have talked to attorneys who know that, and know that no matter what I do, they're going to impose penalties and fees and orders, and they're never going to let me be a free man again unless I pay the ransom money, unless I pay the price, which right now is up to about $20,000. It's actually more than that. It's $20,000 in, supposed back child support. It's about $9,000 in her attorney's fees that they've recently, imposed on me. And any motion that I make, I have to go through Timothy Mulrooney. I have to submit it to his chambers initially, and then he can say whether I can file it or not. I'm not sure if that's part of the law or if that's just, Hennepin County referees get to do that. So the crazy thing is, my daughter and I have a fabulous relationship all through when they tried to separate us for 3 years. She used to sneak out of the house and call, text me or call me and say, meet me at the lake, or meet me in Uptown, or meet me, And so we saw each other on a regular basis. Then she just started coming over. Her mom would call the police. The police would come over. The first and second time I think that happened, the police actually made me take her back there. But after the third time, they just, I said, Lib, talk to him. She sat down and she talked to him, and they said, okay, she can stay tonight, but she should probably go back tomorrow. And I think after the fifth time, they just don't pay any attention to my ex anymore when, if she ever tried to call again, because, she's almost 16 years old. And you're talking about a kid who gets almost straight A's, has been a ballerina and plays lacrosse, and, she's a fabulous kid. On the other hand, the way it negatively affected my son, his future opportunities have greatly been limited by the abuse of the courts. He barely got through high school. He's a great kid. Now that he's spending time with me, I have the job of repairing the damage that's been done. And people ought to be accountable. And people like Angie Banga, Jackie Cardinal, Dave Matthews, these people should be put in jail. Not only should they not be doing their job, they should be put in jail. They're bullies. They're criminals, they're liars, they're cheats, and they're disordered, abusive personalities. I guarantee you most of those people are sociopathic or borderline personalities, and no professional should ever be dealing with and interviewing children one-on-one, alone, unless they have gone through an extensive psychological evaluation and have passed with flying colors. These are our most important assets, our children, and we're letting these clowns who, lie every time they, open their mouths. And it's all motivated and driven by the judges and the lawyers. The judges and lawyers have a racket, and they're getting rich off of it. The guardians and the parenting consultants and the social workers and everybody else involved at the lower level are just pawns for that money-making racket that the judges and lawyers have. And 30 years ago, the Minnesota State Legislature gave up its authority to oversee the judiciary branch. And that was the biggest mistake they ever made. Now the judges have absolute power. It's absolutely corrupt, and it operates exactly like an organized crime syndicate. It's exactly like an organized crime syndicate. There's hush-hush money. There's conversations that, never happen in court. And, the lawyers are all either they're playing the game because they want to be judges or they want to get rich, or they're scared to death, so they have to play the game. And it's a shame. It's just a crying shame. In my view, it's the single most destructive force in our society. It destroys more lives, more healthy children, more healthy parents' lives than any incurable disease or any other social ill. It's fraud and emotional and psychological rape. And every single support service organization is in on the racket, not necessarily because that's the way they wanted it to be, but because if they wanted their piece of the pie, they had to play the game. I know that was a lot longer than 3 minutes, but...
How are we doing over there? Yeah.
Not only did the legislature abrogate their power to the Supreme Court, but Minnesota is the only state in the entire United States that has no legislative, I can't say that word, oversight whatsoever. I mean, some states have where the statutes have to be approved by the legislature, that the courts.
The court rules.
That the court rules.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's some oversight, but Minnesota is the only one where they have, and what's that word? Where they've decided themselves. I can't think of the word. The only state.
Absolute authority is what they have.
I've got the chart. Someone did a chart.
Yeah.
And it explains exactly.
Yeah, there's no checks and balances on the judiciary anymore in Minnesota, and it's the effect of that is they think they're God. They truly think. I mean, I can't stress it enough. It's exactly like an organized crime syndicate.
Well, how do they give up authority over the judiciary? What did they do?
It was about 30 years ago now, I believe, maybe 31 years ago. They basically passed some, statute or some rule that said that, they were that the Supreme Court was actually going to be the presider over, I think, any judicial issues. So now it's, I mean, it's like they're all in the same club, and the Supreme Court reigns, over all the judges. And if you don't do the right thing, it's just amazing to me. The judge who got Dale Nathan disbarred, is it Bradley, or I can't remember the name, but this guy was a criminal. He was a judge. He was a criminal. I mean, he committed several, admittedly criminal acts, but he was a judge, so nobody could do anything about it. Eventually, I think not too long ago, he finally got kicked off the bench. But for 15 years, the guy was reigning terror over, everybody. And, you have the state appellate court. I mean, can you imagine a court of appeals looking at a letter from a 15, 14-year-old girl that says that her mom has threatened to burn everything in her room? And that's not endangerment? By any sane objective person's measure, that is emotional endangerment. And it meets every standard of that. They just ignored it. They didn't even acknowledge that it was part of the motion. So, and they slapped me with $6,500 in attorney's fees. And I was talking to Dale, and that's unheard of. I mean, the only time that happens is when they have somebody who's fighting the system, who knows what the truth is and is, not going to shut up. Then they start slapping penalties on you, and they do everything they can to make you powerless. So, They just keep pounding away on you, hoping that, you'll, and a lot of people do. I mean, a lot of these people that are showing up to testify, they're survivors. There's countless numbers of people that are homeless, sitting in dark bars, who have been through the same thing and didn't have the strength to survive it. That's what the judicial and legal system in this country is doing to hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people every year. And it's all about money. The lawyers are getting rich. The judges are already rich. In Minnesota, they can accept $150 bribes without ever even acknowledging it. It's just absolutely crazy. And the lawyers in the legislature are really there to defend the syndicate. And when you go and testify, you can always tell who the lawyers are, because they're the ones that get red-faced and start, attacking you. I saw a guy attacking Dale Nathan. I mean, this was, who's that guy? He's from like Wayzata. God, what's his name? Senator, God, I wish I could remember his name. He is, this guy should be Steve Smith? Simons or Smith?
It's one of the two.
One of the two. Whoever the lawyer is.
They're both lawyers.
Yeah. Just demeaning and talking down to Dale. While Dale is this, I mean, if anybody should ever get a Medal of Honor, Dale Nathan should get a Medal of Honor. I mean, he has been fighting this system,
With us?
bringing the attention, to the state legislature for years. And he's helped so many people. There's probably, of the people that you're interviewing, I know there's at least 8 or 10 of them that Dale has been working tirelessly to help. So, it's just almost, laughable to me, because I understand it, because I've been a victim, that the general public doesn't recognize this, doesn't accept this. And the judges are the most prolific liars of anyone in society, because they believe that they are untouchable, that they can say whatever they want and the public will believe what they're saying is true. And they've been leading this, complete, false and fraudulent charade for years now, that the truth is the foundation of justice. I heard one of the Supreme Court justices in Minnesota being interviewed making that claim. Guess what? It's the biggest lie there is in this country, because they don't care about the facts. They don't care about the children. The biggest lie overall is the way the judges pretend as if nothing's wrong. The second biggest lie is in family court, where they say that they're acting in the best interest of the children. Nothing could be further from the truth. No decision they ever make has anything to do with the best interest of the children. It all has to do with, how are we in Hennepin County going to most benefit? What direction do we need to push this case so that we will get more federal funding? And we all know that one of the primary sources of funding for the court systems, and the judges know this, so we can pay their lucrative salaries and their pensions and all their benefits, is if they order the highest possible amount of child support. That's the key to collecting money, because they get somewhere between $2 and $4 for every dollar of child support that they collect from the federal government. And many counties have found that's their main money-making machine. Some counties are different. Carver County is a really bizarre county. And there's a guy down there by the name of Richard Perkins. That guy ought to be tried for treason, and I mean, you do a psychological evaluation on him and he's a nut job. He's abusing people down there in ways that, should put him in the penitentiary for the rest of his life. He's arrogant. He's a sociopath guaranteed, if not a psychopath. That system in Carver County is scary. And Hennepin County is bad. Washington County is bad. Ramsey County. It's everywhere in this state. And Minnesotans need to wake up and realize that the judges and the lawyers are running this country. And think about it, the legal industry, one of the few remaining professional industries that is completely self-regulated. There's no oversight of the lawyers. It's the lawyers' board, you know.
Do you know what the second largest industry in America is?
Law? No.
Isn't that ridiculous?
Yeah. And it's, you know, hey, you know, if money is the only thing that matters to them, then they've done one hell of a job, because the goose that lays the golden egg is the divorce and custody industry. And they know it. That industry has been growing at a rate of 20% a year for the last, 15, 20 years. Stephen Baskerville wrote a book, Taken into Custody. It's an excellent book. He really opened my eyes to what was going on. And if I could ever recommend a book to young kids and people getting into the adulthood, there's a book called The Sociopath Next Door by Martha Stout. If I had read that book before I got married, I never would have gotten married to the person that I did. And there's a lot of those kinds of people. The scary thing is, she works for Hennepin County. She works in a situation where she is giving advice and therapy to mentally ill people. And as one of my sons, one of his good therapists a long time ago told me, it takes one to know one. When I stressed my concern that it seems like half these therapists are nuts themselves. He said, it takes one to know one. And you can be a psychologist and you can be a therapist, and you never have to go through a psychological evaluation. Think about that. If that kind of person is attracted, you know, because they can relate to their patients because they live it, probably a very high percentage of psychologists and therapists in this country are mentally ill. And there should be, you know, when you're dealing with family court, dealing with children, no one should ever be allowed to interact on an individual basis with a child unless they have the highest level of credentials, including having gone through a rigorous psychological evaluation by 2 or 3 objective parties. I mean, that should be the law. And you know what? The industry where they've done studies that show the highest percentage of sociopathic disorder personalities is? Lawyers.
Sure. Lawyers and judges.
Yeah.
I've got to turn on some air. I'm about to roll. Does your daughter want to talk on camera?
She might. If you give her the opportunity, she might.
All right.
You know, I just want to give